Judge Sarah, and she is from the 63rd District Court, which is over in Kent County. She has been on the bench since 1990. She is also a past president of our Western region of the Women Lawyers Association. So welcome, Judge. We are very excited to have you.
Thank you.
Angie Martell of Inglesia Martell Law Firm. She practices in family law, LGBTQA, and ADR. And she also does holistic law, and she will tell us more about that. Welcome, Angie. Thank you for being here. And last, we have Robin Wagner, who is, and I have to cheat, she works for Pitt, McGee, Palmer, Benani, and Rivers Law Firm, and she practices in labor and employment law. And she is also a member of the Women Lawyers Association. So welcome, Robin. Thank you for being here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with them telling you a little bit about themselves and about what pride means to them, why it's important. It's going to be very brief. And then we're going to take a little poll so you can tell us about your level of comfort or knowledge with this area of law. It is anonymous, so please do not panic. No one will know if you say, I don't know anything. That is totally an acceptable answer. And then we're going to move into more specifics about the law. So I'm going to turn it over to Judge Smolinski first. Judge, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Alina, and thank you to your committee. You guys have done a great job. And I feel very honored to be part of this because Angie Martell and Robin Wagner are really the experts in this area. I feel like I've gotten more requests to speak about anything LGBTQ since an incident in November of 2019 when I was really publicly outed by being denied communion at my church. It went national news, and I'm still having people write me letters about it. I'll get to that in a second. I was elected in 1990. So I've been on the bench 31 years, district court, and I'm one of 10 kids, 9 daughters. My brother was a judge, Court of Appeals, Circuit District, the opposite way, District Circuit Court of Appeals. And my dad was a district judge. So we have the judicial role in the family a bit. I have one sister that's a lesbian, and I like to say I was the first lesbian in our family. She was married for some 20 years and had children, and then realized her situation. I'm embarrassed a little bit because the history that Angie and Robin are going to talk about, they're so well adept to knowing, practicing law. I'm a judge. It's not the same thing. I don't have an expertise in any one area really. But I've been gay as long as I can remember. I never could talk about it. So this is unique for me in the sense that maybe over the last 2 years, I've probably been asked to speak at just say 10 different things, including during the pandemic, all by Zoom, of course, about my experience with the church. So I'm just going to give you a little brief synopsis of that because I'm totally supportive of everything LGBTQ, but I grew up not in my family. My family's always been supportive, but I grew up not being able to talk about it, really, other than your core group of support people in your family. Because especially when I ran for office, I remember running for office. It was the first time I talked to my now mother-in-law, and I said, it really could come out that publicly they're going to talk about me being a lesbian. And being a public official, you didn't talk about it. In fact, you tried not to talk about it. While my opponent is focusing on family values and shows a picture of his wife and his kids, I'm like, well, I'm 32 years old. I'm a lesbian, but I didn't say that. I'm not married because you couldn't be. But I was in a committed relationship that I'm still in today, 32 years later. I got a call out of the blue in November of 2019 from the priest at my parish. Now, I got a lot of beef with the Catholic Church, and I did before, but it was part of me growing up. It was part of our family growing up. I went to grade school there. We all did. I was a member of this church really my whole life, except being away from school, college and law school. And they had a new priest that'd been there about 3 years. I'd been married 3 years at that point. Still didn't make a big deal about it with him. Didn't talk to him much about it. You know how sometimes you take away the good things from something, but you don't always agree with every single thing? That's how I've been with the church. But I never in a million years thought I'd get the call that I got. And it's probably what Biden is feeling a little bit now when everybody's talking about should he get communion. And really, even if you don't even think about the Catholic Church, it could be a lot of different religions, but it just happened to be the one I belong to. And this young priest called me and said, he called me on the phone and said, I can't take communion. I thought he was going to ask me to be on a committee. I mean, I've been active in my church. My spouse is Methodist, so we didn't always go to church together. And she's a great Methodist. She's a better Methodist than I ever was a Catholic. In fact, you know, the Methodists, and Susan, you're on the Zoom. I'm a friend of Susan Keener, goes to the same church as my spouse. You know, they're trying to be very supportive, but every church has its issues. Let's face it, with the LGBT community. I mean, most of them do. They want to be inclusive, but there's a catch, or they want to be helpful or whatever. And I was really thrown by it, just thrown by it. And there's still a lot of priests that I know that I'm friends with, that they know I'm gay, and they would give me communion in a heartbeat. I thought it was a little bit unique that 2 months later, 3 months later, the pandemic hits, and now nobody can have communion. I thought Jesus had a pretty good sense of humor on that one, because really, you'd never in a million years think all of a sudden, well, we never thought we'd have a pandemic, but you'd never think it stopped people from going to church. And not only can you not go to church, you can't meet, you can't be together, you can't have communion, you can't do any of the things that have affected our life through this pandemic, but I'm digressing. It hit the news. You know, I had a busy day at court one day, and I had a big currency case about when they were trying to talk about a big felony case that had to do with counterfeit bills. And I thought the media was there for that. I mean, I had probably 10 cases, and I just got done. I didn't have a file left. And I said to the guy from the media, who I know, because when you're in the court, you work with them. I said, well, what are you here on? He said, can I talk to you privately? I thought for sure it was the counterfeit case. No, he said, we heard you got denied communion. And I said, really? So the whole point I'm trying to make is it catches us at different times when things happen. Next thing you know, I'm having the Associated Press call me. I'm having CNN call me at my house. I'm having all these media outlets contact me about, is it true? Did you get denied communion? On the phone, I got denied communion. I didn't get denied communion going up. That probably would have been more humiliating, but this was bad enough. And I just thought to myself, if I don't talk to the media, even though I've been kind of programmed not to talk, you know, I'm 63, I'm in my last term. I just got elected to an 8-year term in November. I'm not worried about it as much anymore. Let them say what they're going to say about me, because it's done. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I was plenty worried about it. And there are people to this day that wouldn't vote for me because I'm gay. So you got to deal with it. I always think it's unique when people will say, well, do you really feel discrimination because you're gay? Like, I had a brother-in-law say that to me. Do you guys really feel like you've ever experienced discrimination? You want to say, what the hell planet are you living on? Like, really? You can't recognize? We couldn't even be married until 2015. You know, you talk about that, but it hit the news, and I thought, I've got to speak out. I've got to speak out, because the person that's working at McDonald's that's getting denied communion, they're not coming to them and say, oh, did you get denied communion? It's all because I was a judge, and only because I was a judge. And I always thought I'd be known as the funny judge, not the gay judge that got denied communion. I had people from all other countries contacting me. 97% of the information I got from people was all positive, and that was really a blessing. But when you talk about how this affects our lives, being gay is one part of who I am. Like being a blonde, okay, really white hair now. Being a Michigan Wolverine. I played ball at Michigan. I have my letter at Michigan. People that know me know that I love the Michigan Wolverines, but I have half my family was Spartans, so I love Spartans too. It's part of who you are. It's not everything. It's like the joke about you meet someone that's gay, or someone will say, did you know so-and-so? And I mean, it's not like every gay person knows every other gay person. Yet I did that. I called Angie. I called Robin last week and I said, you guys, we're talking and I don't know you. Like, what angle are you coming from? You know, I didn't know. So it's all a learning experience, but I know that what you need to do, number one, is believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself, be true to your authentic self, no matter what, even when it's hard to do it. And then also we have to make sure that we educate others, because getting allies like the Susan Keeners, like the Dave Jordan, who's a colleague of mine, retired district judge from Lansing. We need to get those people that are allies to us. I never even knew they had the LGBT group. I mean, years ago, they didn't have the LGBT group at Women Lawyers. They didn't have it at the state bar level. So all that's new. I mean, it's not exactly new, it's a few years, but it's new, comparatively speaking. And we have to do more about speaking out when there's injustice, whether it's about us as gay people, whether it's about others, whether it's about any area of discrimination. We have to speak out. So that's my little ditty, and I don't want to take up too much time because Robin and Angie are the ones that are the experts practicing law in an area where they are so well versed, and so many of the people aren't well versed about the topics of gay, lesbian, transgender. They don't know, and they're doing it for their life's work. So you know they're totally committed to it. And really, I don't get very many cases about the issue. One time in my 31 years career, I said I was gay on the record. And it was because I had a man in front of me charged with assault and battery. And the assault and battery was against his son when his son came out to him. His son came out to the dad, and the son was an adult. The dad was probably 65, 70. And the son was in his 30s. And I said to the defendant, he pled, but I said to him, are you going to beat up every gay person you know? Because I'm gay. So that means you'd want to take a swing at me. I mean, it's the first and only time I've ever really said it, but it seemed to fit. I don't know if I made my point with him, but like, what's your problem, really? And this was his son. Okay, I'm saying too much.
Well,
Thank you.
Josh. There's a lot of really amazing nuggets in there that I'd like to hit on, but I want to give everybody a chance.
Yeah, that's good.
Robin, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and about what pride means to you and all of that, to expand upon what the judge shared with us?
Yeah, sure. So I am middle-aged to life, but new to law. I in my 40s, I wasn't so happy with what I was doing in my career. I was in higher ed administration, and instead of having a midlife crisis and buying a sports car, I went to law school. Also because I really very much felt like I was on the sidelines. I donated money to LGBTQ causes and organizations that I cared about, but I just felt like maybe I could get involved in it myself and do the work, and was very inspired by what I saw going on in the courts, and the advances that were coming through the action of the courts. Also, very much amazed and grateful for the incredible creative work that a lot of lawyers did to sew together our rights out of existing laws where they could find them, contract laws and things like that, to create rights for lesbians and gays trying to have families, trying to adopt children, to do all sorts of things that weren't legally allowed, but figuring out ways to make it possible. And that inspired me a lot too. That I knew I wanted to work in civil rights or hang up a shingle and do family law. Something where I could make a difference that way. So in the end, I went to law school and set my sights on being able to do civil rights work. I got to intern for Lambda Legal and for the ACLU when I was in law school. And then when I graduated, I had two amazing opportunities to work for judges, one in the Southern District and one on our Zoom call. Judge Levy, who's on the Zoom call, an important mentor and also someone who's been out and proud in her work and in her life a long time. And then now I work at a law firm where I think about employment discrimination, housing discrimination, very, very generally, but also when I get the chance to meet someone, a transgender person or a lesbian who's been discriminated against by an organization, by their employer, that gives me a great deal of pride to be able to do that work. And the other thing I'll just say about what pride means to me is I spend a lot of time always, but particularly I welcome the month of June as an opportunity to really remember that expression where we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us, and that there were huge, courageous struggles that the people at Stonewall, the people before Stonewall, the Mattachine Society, the Daughters of Bilitis, the people who were out and creating community and protecting each other and fighting for more ability to be open in the world and make room for the rest of us. That's just a really meaningful and powerful for me, particularly this time of year. So.
That's great. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The statement of standing on the shoulders of people that came before us. That's how I feel about Judge Smolinski being a public official and being comfortable with saying that, because it's hard. It's hard because, like Judge Smolinski was saying, I don't want to necessarily be known as the gay prosecutor. I'm the only one in my office. I haven't met very many others in this area of law. I want to be the smart prosecutor, right? So the minute we say, this is the way I identify, you tend to get labeled in it and you get pigeonholed, you get put in a box. Like, I'm supposed to know everything there is about softball. He knows I don't know sports, so I don't know why you're asking me this question, but let's move on to you, Angie. If you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit about Pride, the history of it, or what it means to you.
And you're muted, Angie. You're muted.
Sorry, my dog was barking, so I wanted
That's
to
all right.
respect the space. Happy Gay Pride, everybody, or happy Pride. And thank you to WLAM for having us here. So I knew that I was gay when I was 5 years old. I grew up Latina and Puerto Rican in New York, and I always thought all the nuns were lesbians. So we grew up Roman Catholic. One of the biggest things that I think about, and I've been practicing for 30 years in LGBT law. I've also been out, for more than that. But one of the biggest things for me is that I'm even though I've practiced that long, I'm admitted in federal courts in New York, Massachusetts, Puerto Rico, and Michigan. I'm still a second-class citizen in my own nation. I can be denied public accommodations. I can be denied housing. There are certain places of employment, even though the employment law has gotten better over the years. I feel that really genuinely much more as a lesbian person than I do as a Latina person. And that's a hard one for me to say, because I have great pride in being Puerto Rican and being Latina. I have children that are LGBT. And what pride means to me, and they're in New York right now celebrating Pride because they just got graduated from high school and going to college. But what it means for me as a person who's LGBT and has kids who are LGBT is the promise of this nation that we are all equal citizens. And I'm a lawyer, and I want to hold our nation to that. And I know that all of you in this in this Zoom are also doing that. And what pride means to me is, growing up in New York, I always passed by Stonewall. I met the drag queens who were dragged out and heard the stories of the police and the brutality. But then I also got to march in New York City Pride events. And I also got to move away from the term homosexual, which I can't stand. And we became LGBT people. So 10 years ago, I moved from New York to Michigan. I was married. And one of my colleagues said, you know, Andrew, you're not married anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm married. I have a license. And they're like, no, Michigan won't recognize it. And that's why it's important to me to do the work that I do. I first went to law school. Bowers v. Hardwick was just decided in 1986. And I was like, well, the Supreme Court said sodomy is constitutional and somebody can come into your bedroom and haul you away for a traffic ticket, or I think it was an open beverage. Why should I become a lawyer? And as a result of that, and talking to Rhonda Copeland, who worked for the Center for Constitutional Rights and some other civil rights attorneys in New York, I decided to be an ACT UP legal observer and an attorney. And I worked with Paula Edelbrick on the Sharon Kowalski case. And, you know, you got to be humble about things, because I was full of, you know, a lot of vim and vigor. And I said to Paula, why are we doing a case in Minnesota on guardianship? And she was like, because it matters. It really matters. And the Sharon Kowalski case made me realize even now how important it is for us to have rights and for us to make sure that our children are protected, our relationships are protected. I was also Lambda cooperating attorney and NCR cooperating attorney, and now I'm on the State Bar of Michigan chair-elect of the LGBTQ section. So I would put a call out to all of you. If you think we should be doing something, please reach out to me. I'll put my email on the chat. But what it means to me is I want to be an equal citizen in this nation. That's why I celebrate Pride, and that's why I have pride in doing this.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you mind, Angie, telling people just a little bit about what the Kowalski case was about?
So the Sharon Kowalski case, I believe, was in the early 90s. I think it was 1993. Sharon Kowalski got into an accident. A drunk driver hit her in the middle of the night, and she had not been out to her parents. She was living with Karen Thompson for a period of time. The parents then came to the house. They didn't know about the relationship, or they alleged they didn't know about the relationship. Because they were not legally married, there was no domestic partnership, there was no documentation in place for guardianship or powers of attorney or anything of that sort. The parents got to decide. Unfortunately, Sharon Kowalski's accident was pretty severe. She was in a coma for a period of time. The parents made decisions that were antithetical to their very, very long-term relationship. I can't remember right now how long it was. I think it was more than a decade. Long story short, after a 10-year legal battle, Karen Thompson was finally given the guardianship of Sharon Kowalski, who never really recovered from the accident. But it's a reminder to all of us, even now, because in the state of Michigan, if you're not married, you have to have a funeral representative document written up as part of your estate planning. If you don't, then you only can have a legal blood relation or legal or blood relation. And those people then get to decide, and for $10, they can exhume the body and transfer the body to their own family plot. So, you know, horror stories. So that's the Sharon Kowalski case in a nutshell, but it makes us think about when, as attorneys, we have a cultural a competency, a responsibility to be competent. And to be competent means we have to understand the communities we serve, especially if we're serving LGBT. And our needs and our communities are very diverse and different. We may not come out to you in the first meeting because we don't know you from Adam and we don't have rights. And you might have said something, you know, problematic in the first one, like misusing a pronoun. Instead of saying they, you say her, or you assume the person is married and say, where's your husband?
Yep. 100%. Thank you so much for that. And that's going to be an awesome segue for us to move into talking a little bit more about the law and what we as attorneys need to be aware of, and discussing some of those cultural competency things, specifically because of our obligations ethically as attorneys. So what I'm going to do, Christina, if you are ready, I would like to have all of you participate in a poll so we can kind of see where we're at. And then we're going to move into talking a little bit more specifically about law stuff. I feel like we should have the Jeopardy music playing in the background for this.
Yeah. Do, 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 do.
Looks like we've got almost everybody in. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to share that, Christina, or do you want me to?
Okay.
I'm gonna
Hopefully it's supposed to be sharing right
Honest with
now.
everybody. Okay. I am zero competent when it comes to technology, so that's why Christina's here to make sure I don't make a total fool of myself. So thank you. All right, can everyone see this? So for knowledge, we have 15% somewhat knowledgeable and very little knowledge as it relates to law, to LGBTQ ACE community, and your knowledge of Pride Month, 38, 46, and 15%. So that's very interesting. Okay, wonderful. All right, well, let's move into, and I think that you kind of touched on this a little bit, Angie. So I'll have you continue, if you will, why it's so important for this community to have marriage equality.
Well, I thought we were going to start with the access to justice. Okay.
Oh,
so
we can
marriage
do that.
equality,
We
no,
can do
that's
that.
okay. So marriage equality, I was not on board when Evan Wolfson came up with marriage equality in 1988, and Paul Edelbrick. I was at that Lavender Law Conference, and for many of us, marriage equality was not the issue. For many people of color, especially LGBTQ people, that is not our main issue, because for many women, women don't consider necessarily marriage an institution that has been very equal. So marriage equality, I think, is an important step, but it has become a step where people have relied on their laurels and said, well, we have privilege now, we don't really need to do anything. They're not calling us homosexuals, but it's just the beginning of many things. And my personal opinion, I think we got a little sidetracked on marriage. I kind of hoped that we would deal more with equity and cultural issues and equality. I know that, in terms of women that are, low income and working class women, the glass ceiling hasn't been shattered. And so while I love to be, I love that I have all the 1,500 benefits of marriage, it's an institution that I don't necessarily support.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking too, like, I really loved how you pointed out the fact that it's so important to contemplate when you meet with clients, if you're doing estate planning and things like that, because if you don't have the protection of marriage, what that means for your client. And that was so spot on to say, these are things that sometimes you have to think about, because we may not look to you like we're a member of this community, or you may just assume. So it's important to do a little bit more digging. So let's move into.
Can I say one thing to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to make a confession here, being the true Catholic that I am. So I have actually told people to get married if they want to have kids. I do a lot of artificial reproductive technology and the right to parent. So unfortunately, because our laws are so draconian and there's so many barriers, that if you live in the state of Michigan, and for portability, it's easier if you have kids and you're married, because it's presumed to be a child of the marriage. If you're not, then you have to put many legal protections in place. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's important.
And I just wanted to add this. I mean, many of us thought we would never see the day where marriage equality became a reality. And, just for us to be able to be married. and it's almost like such a huge thing that, well, I'm just trying to express it from the standpoint that, like, my spouse and I, when we got married, shortly after it became legal, you know, we only had one of our four parents left. Three had passed away. But at the time, we thought we would not live to see it, let alone, you know, having the 93-year-old mother, you know, walk us down the aisle.
Lovely.
I mean, so it's a concept like you can barely get your brain around it. And yet, even then, there are people out there, even today, right now, as we're speaking, that don't really acknowledge our wedding, our marriage, like the Catholic Church. Not that I'm going to get off on that again, but, you know, so many that don't accept, even though, yeah. So, I mean, it's a concept that, you know, I never thought I'd live to see it, let alone my mother-in-law walking us down the aisle. But how fortunate. And it's unique too, because when we got married, both families knew each other for 28 years. You know what I mean? We knew each other, the families, the siblings, the nieces and nephews. So you've been to a lot of weddings where you hardly know anybody, you know? This is like everybody knew everybody because we'd been together for so long and finally could do it. And then the good old Methodist ministers helped us have a religious ceremony, you know, but, you know, still you don't feel, you know, when all the groups aren't accepting it, you don't feel like you're really, I mean, I know I'm married. I don't mean it that way, but there's still not equality is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
If I can, first, there's a comment in the chat about what were civil unions and why are they different than marriage. But I also want to unpack a few things that have been said between Sarah and Angie on this topic. So marriage is, the marriage equality came at a cost to the queer community. And the cost it came to explain is that it is in many ways a class issue. My wife and I look a lot like you other normal people out there. We live the same kind of life you can relate to. We have a house, we have a dog, we have a yard, we garden, we things like that, right? And so to that degree, the positive side, it's a double edge. On the one side, marriage creates the humanizing aspect, to Sarah's point, about having our lives be understandable to the larger mainstream community. And then with the idea behind putting marriage equality first was that it would lead to lots of other rights. There's some ways of looking at the legal structure of the decisions that led to the Bostock decision last year. That granted employment, rights under Title VII, and say that that's a natural progression of legal thinking, and that marriage equality was an essential cornerstone of that. Not sure it could happen the other way. Neither here nor there, but it humanized and created an open door for other kinds of rights. At the same time, though, it leaves behind people who do not identify and live their lives in this kind of mainstream picket fence way. Yeah. And it in some ways even more ostracizes those folks from the mainstream community. Why don't you just, be normal and get married like everybody else? Why not have that kind of life? And so I think that's the brutal edge to marriage equality rights that we need to think about. It leaves disenfranchised people further to the side of the road in some regards. And also within that structure, if you look at the expansion of the queer community to welcome and fight for, embrace and fight for the rights of transgender folks and gender nonconforming folks, what you have there is now we have splinters. Now we have people within the radical, I don't know if you call it radical or conservative aspect of feminist lesbians who do not welcome and support and fight for the rights of transgender people. And that's very painful, especially thinking about how it wasn't so long ago that I
Right.
didn't have any employment rights or any marriage
Right.
rights, and what does it take to now look at people who suffer immense amount of violence, hate violence based on who they are. So so for instance, you'll notice that my name and a couple of other of us on this call put I put my preferred pronouns. Now I do that not because I'm transgender or have any specific concern about what pronouns people use. I do it to make space for a transgender person to feel welcomed and recognized, that I don't make assumptions about what pronouns to use. My wife, who's a professor, has gone even further in a way that I really admire and going to strive to capture. She has taken to calling people it until, or they, until she has been informed what their preferred gender identity is. So to Angie's point about trying to make your law practice and to fulfill your ethical obligations as an attorney, to meet people where they are, to understand them and make an open space for them to seek honestly your counsel. It's really important to try and take these steps, even if it's very confusing to teach your brain how to talk about a single person as a they. You can do it. You can get there. You can change your writing to do that, to just use they as the default pronoun, third person pronoun, and not use he or she anymore. It's weird at first, but you get used to it. Also, a good friend and who was a co-clerk with me, he has taken to being to painting his nails and to dressing in ways that are very emphatically out about his being a queer man of color. And even when he is making oral argument in front of a federal appeals court, he has his nails are gorgeous. I envy his hands. I don't, I mean, I'm embarrassed to show my hands after thinking about him. But, and so what he feels he's doing, and what I respect so much about that, is that he's trying to make more space in the legal community for someone to just be willing to be out at all, to say, I'm here, I'm really queer, and I'm proud of it, and you can be who you need to be and want to be, and in this space which is full of stodgy people in suits and robes. So I love that aspect of what we can do as attorneys to make our profession more open, and to expand on the letters of the laws that we work with to make them as inclusive as possible. So anyway, those are just a few thoughts I had on how this marriage topic affects the larger goal.
Yeah,
and by the way,
amazing.
he's a picket fence gay guy too. You know, he and his husband have a dog and a house and a yard, but he's making the space bigger for all of us by doing what he does in his personal
Takes a lot of courage.
expression.
Yeah, I love that. I love that comment, making the space bigger for other people. And I see your hand up, Angie. We're going to move it over to you in a second, because I definitely want to get into access to justice. But I think that this really kind of makes a good point of getting there, that when you add things on, like your pronouns and things like that, it's not about you necessarily. It's about making it more normalized, that people don't always identify the way you do. And I think a lot of times is those of us that identify as women, we know what it's like, even in pleading sometimes it's still, or laws, it's only a she or only a he. And it's like, well, no, I'm a woman attorney, so you can, address me as such. So I think that that's really, really important. And if there's anything you take out of this, then there's that one thing that you can do to help make this space more accessible and more, friendly to people that are not like you. So Angie, tell us your thoughts. I know you've got.
So I want to say
this.
one thing on that, and I want to go back to the civil marriage. So one thing I want to say is make sure you get permission from a client before you out them. We don't live in a state that's safe. So
True.
ask them permission, what pronouns they want in the pleadings, how would they want to be addressed? How can you make the courtroom more accessible to them? Those are very important conversations, whether the person's deaf, whether they're LGBT, that's an important conversation to have. I want to go back to the civil union because I'm all about access to justice and also competency. Because if you're not competent, you better have a lot of malpractice insurance. And one of the issues is cultural competency. So civil unions are different. First of all, if you look at the IRS and the Social Security Administration, you don't have the same rights under those conditions. Now, some states have, again, we're looking at portability because Michigan never had civil union, but if you have individuals that came from a different state, you want to look at the collateral issues that come before your case. Just because you're a family lawyer doesn't mean you have to not look at other things. So portability, one example would be if you're in a civil union, highly unlikely that in a criminal case, you're going to have a spousal privilege. Now, you could put pressure and say that the civil union from Vermont was sort of conveyed into a marriage, because some states did convert the unions into marriages, but you better be accurate on that if you're putting somebody on the stand and asking for spousal privilege. The same thing with tax benefits, the same thing with Social Security benefits. If you have a minor child and that minor child is going to take the deceased person and they had a civil union, they may not be able to have the benefits. The state of Washington, I didn't know this, I learned as I go along. If you have a domestic partnership in the state of Washington and you move to Michigan, but you were under the age of 62, that domestic partnership converted into a marriage in the state of Washington, but only in the state of Washington. So you want to be able to make sure that you have enough information before you give your client information about how they proceed, whether it's estate planning, criminal cases, family law cases, or anything else that you may do, even, personal injury, which I don't really do. But these are the things to think about because you're giving people advice, they're relying upon your advice, and you want to make sure that you've included every single thing. Lavender law, many of us are accessible. If you don't, I'm not a member of Lavender Law and you're a family law attorney, Family Law Institute is amazing. And we have to think about portability because people move constantly and they go from other places. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Do you want me to go into excessive justice or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So access to justice, why is it important? Well, not only because the Supreme Court Justice Bridget McCormick and Justice Roberts indicated that they're important. It's because it's the place of dignity and equality in a courtroom. And I was at a panel when Judge Levy, Justice Levy spoke, and one of the things that I had a chuckle when she said that male lawyers didn't respect the space sometimes. They didn't even do the homework of who the judge in front of them was, and he handed her his coat, and I thought, oh my God, if that happened to a judge, what does that mean for little old me, going into a county? And what does that mean for my clients? So I'm there, I'm little, I'm only 5 feet tall, but I stand really tall in the courtroom to make sure that my client is heard, their story is heard, and that they receive respect. And that's what access to justice is. It's harder and harder, and you have to be on your toes. There's a lot of jury bias, especially if you do criminal cases. The homosexual panic defense has come up a couple of times, not so much in this state, but it has come up in criminal cases. And you want to make sure that you understand the case you're at. And I think that the judges we just presented, the State Bar of Michigan just presented to judges in the State Bar of Michigan, they're very receptive. I'm very honored that they're really looking at how do we have access to justice for everybody in the state of Michigan and have equality. So that's my 2 cents on access to justice. But cultural competency, I mean, the ethical rules are clear. You have to be competent. And being competent means being culturally competent. You know, if you don't ask the right questions, you can't say, oh, well, I didn't know. No, you have to look at the collateral. If you don't know, there's plenty of other people that probably do.
Ask somebody. Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's really important. I'm glad you brought up the criminal aspect, because this is something I want to say to the criminal defense attorneys. It's very important that you find out what your client's situation is if they're going to be in custody, because it is not kind to them when they're incarcerated to be a member of our community. And also, please don't necessarily out them on the record, because the other people sitting in the jury box with them that they're going to be transported with may not take too kindly to the fact that they're a member of this community. So it may be something sensitive that you want to discuss in chambers. And it's so important. I can't tell you the number of times that our defendants that are put into custody and are put into a situation where they are going to be hurt, possibly killed, because of their orientation. So, I mean, definitely make sure that that's something. I try to do it as the prosecutor, but you're going to be in a better position to get that information from your client. So thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that up. Robin, you want to touch on, I know we're getting kind of close to time, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts on access to justice and cultural competency as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to, we were talking about the laws a little bit, and the laws have changed a lot. So another piece of our competence as an attorney is to stay on top of these things. But so just as an example, in the employment discrimination field and housing discrimination for that matter, the federal laws have changed. Title VII does provide protections, but I'm going to put a giant asterisk in that around you have no protections if you work, I think, for a religious organization anymore. You might have at some point, but I think I certainly, my colleagues and I are rather hard pressed to find an avenue towards victory, and we try really hard when there's an employer who's like the Catholic Church or something these days. But the other thing to keep in mind, and this is technical but very important, under federal law, Title VII is a bit more powerful in some key ways than the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act is, or the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act can be, mostly in the form of what kinds of damages are available. But the Title VII has the 300-day statute of limitations in terms of being able to bring your claim before to the EEOC in order to be able to preserve your rights. The Elliott-Larsen and the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Acts have 3-year statutes of limitations, only they don't apply to people who are gay. They don't protect sexual orientation or gender identity yet. There are efforts to support changing those laws, but they don't yet. And so when you're thinking about your client's rights, and there are, to Angie's point, quite a few areas in which the rights differ quite a lot. So it is very important to make sure that you understand how the law is shifting and changing, and stay on top of those decisions. I think that we dodged a bullet a little bit with the Fulton, the Pennsylvania decision about the foster care. It was a very narrow decision, as was Masterpiece Cake Shop. But those decisions about the pitting of gender and sexual orientation rights against religious rights, that's going to continue. It's going to have the effect, the unfortunate possible effect of narrowing and trimming our rights. And that's something to stay on top of. Anyway, those are just points that I think are really important, that are in the weeds of the law, but these weeds matter a hell of a lot when you have someone who lost their job as a high school teacher because of sexual orientation.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. I don't think that people necessarily realize when they don't have a lot of clients that maybe are of this community, how quickly our law has been changing and evolving, and we take steps forward and we take steps back, and then you've got to deal with the fact that states are different than other states. And I remember even people just being like, what do you mean you can't get married? you know, like that, they don't think about it because it doesn't necessarily impact them. What do you mean you can be fired for being LGBTQ?
Yeah, people were shocked
Yeah,
when I told them that the Supreme, a year or two ago, when that
yes.
case was being decided, and I told people, that's that. Wait, you what?
Yeah.
Truly didn't believe it. Yeah.
I remember when that case came out and I posted something on my social media about it. And I had a lot of people message me privately like, what does this mean? And I said, well, it means now you can't be fired for being of this community. And they're like, you could before. And it's shocking. So I just real quick, because I know that we're getting towards the end of our time, I'd like to talk a little bit, if you could, and this is both for Angie and for Robin, tell us what are some things that are kind of up and coming in this area of law that people really need to take the time to be aware of and to educate themselves and spend some more time learning about some hot topic issues. When you want to start with you, Robin?
Well, one is the interplay between First Amendment religious rights and rights that are showing in the statutes for employment discrimination, housing discrimination, and other areas. You're going to have to really watch that carefully. And that is not settled law at all. At this point, religion really does have this stronger protections by far than sexual orientation and gender identity do. I think also honestly, I would think I would fall back on that other point we've been hammering a bit, which is trying your best to become culturally competent around your use of language, pronouns, assumptions. Not Judge Levy, but the judge I worked with in New York, I adore him. He's a lovely man and still a dear friend. But when he was doing voir dire for a jury when I was working for him, he just asked this. He asked everyone, "What does your wife or what does your husband do?" And one man said, "Well, I don't have a wife. I have a husband. Would you like to know what he does?" But that's a real ouch. That was a real ouch moment. And he married my wife and me. So, he knows fully well the possibility exists that the man didn't have a wife. So those are things you have to try and be better about and not fall into those simple traps because they alienate and push people away.
Well, and it is part of our responsibility to continue to educate others, even in those moments that are like you described, Robin. We need to step up, we need to speak out, and it makes a difference. And it makes a difference for a lot of other people. Like you said, riding on the shoulders of those that came before us, we're in an area where we can help those that are, still coming up.
Yes, definitely. Judge, I just want to say thank you. I know that you are going to be accepting an award shortly. So whenever you have to pop off.
Yeah. I never even knew there was a group in Chicago, the Alliance of Illinois Judges. And a very, very humbling time to get a little award from them. So thank you, everybody. Sure appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Angie, I want to get your thoughts before we close on what are some important things to make sure that people are educating themselves about and staying apprised of.
Okay, so in the area of family planning, I would say artificial reproductive technology. Right now, we're living in a very dinosaur era in terms of the law, and the science is far surpassed it. Our estate planning still talks about begetting, who begets who, and there is a conflict between the family law and the estate planning probate system. And I think that that's going to be some changes. We're working in the state bar LGBT section to change a lot of the, husband-wife sections of the law. It's a slow process. We're getting there. Transgender kids and LGBTQIA 2S kids. Kids, I mean, everybody, I think in this group I don't think anybody here is a Generation Z. It is so refreshing to have kids who think outside the box. Their issues are so different. I think that that's the harbinger of things to come, and it's going to blow not only our minds, but it's going to transform the way we think of law. Portability, I think it's important for all of us to be cognizant. People will say, I will always live in the state of Michigan, and then they get a job in Tennessee, and then you're like, oh. So you never know where someone's going to be. Please don't create bad law. People think, oh, I'm going to fight this case, and then they create bad law. The rest of us have to live with that bad law. One case recently was the case where lesbian couple, they weren't married. They separated before they could get married. One was a gestational parent. The other one was a genetic parent. Horrible case. They went to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals gave them both the rights after the lower court stripped of that person of the rights. Religion, I don't buy it. If we have, we say, well, the religious rights, et cetera, et cetera. If we said race, if we said that people can't discriminate on the basis because they're Black or because of anything, we're so stuck with the strict scrutiny that gender and sexual orientation hasn't reached there. And I think that's bigotry. It's absolute bigotry, and it's homophobia, and it's transphobia. And I'm not saying that race doesn't matter and race shouldn't be up there. Of course, it should be strict scrutiny, but we don't say that. And actually, it used to be the case that religion used to say that there's still a covenant in Ann Arbor that says Black people can't own land. It still runs with the land. How horrible is that? That's our laws. So that needs to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say it's also misogynist, right? The lesser scrutiny for gender than for race. But yeah, that the danger of the road we're headed down is that a religious organization can discriminate for any reason it wants, and it gets a free pass. So
yeah, and hate is hate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, if you don't want to give a clear foster families for people who are Muslim, you can have at it, is going to be what happens. It's not going to be just about queers.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's why it's so important that organizations like the Women Lawyers Association and I'm sure all of us are movers and shakers and involved in different organizations, to understand that LGBTQ issues do not just impact the LGBTQ community, it impacts us all. We all need to be educated in this. We're all in this together. I love that hate is hate. It doesn't matter who you're hating against,
Right.
or women or race or whatever. It's humans, and we need to treat each other respectfully and help lift each other up. And I think that that's, something that all of us can agree on. So with that note, I want to say
one quick thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is just a tip that came about outing your client and so on. If you knew your client in a criminal case is transitioning and they have a choice of pronouns, and you get that, this happened to me in court, and when I thought about the difference for that person, I think it was someone transitioning to be female. And they said, she goes by Sharon and her pronouns are she and her. So that when I arraigned her and we did a status conference, she would have felt good. And if I went the other way, she would have felt like shit.
Right.
Just dump on her twice. So if you can communicate, I guess you have to know your judges, but it might be educating for some judges to just hear that from the lawyers.
Yep.
And yeah, that would be, for instance, I've seen briefs that raise that as a preliminary matter, just right up front. This person's legal name may be this, but this is who they are. And it's important to respect and address them in this way, and just head right off the bat.
Yeah, and as Angie mentioned, make sure that your client is okay with that, because they may not be in a space or with their family or whomever they're around that's they may get harmed can help in that circumstance.
And I don't normally call them by first name, but I did have a transgender person that wanted to go by the different name than what the legal name was. And I was referring to the person by the first name, just so that we get it right, because it was completely different, you know, than the legal name on the paperwork we had. And I wanted them to feel comfortable
Mhm.
that, yes, we can, I want to go by what you want to be called.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, it brings so much joy to hear that judges are thinking about these things and aware of these things and are progressive of them, because when it comes from the bench, you know, it's so much more empowering. And I think that that is one thing that our criminal justice system in particular lacks sometimes, is we start to get so caught up in pushing cases through and processing them that we forget we're dealing with humans on both sides, you know, both the defendants and the survivors of these crimes. So it's so refreshing to hear that from, you know, multiple.
Well, and Angie said it well, because our leader, you know, Bridget Mary McCormick, she's very focused on getting us educated. And we as judges have had some training in this just most recently, where before we never, ever had any training about that. So progress is being made, as slow as it might be. We're going in the right direction. At least it feels that way.
Yeah, and I hope to see it continue to go that way. And we'll definitely be doing something like this in the future. So I'm trying to be mindful of everybody's time and respectful of that. So I do want to say thank you again to Robin, Angie, and Judge Smolinski. Thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing. I'm sure that this is true, but if anyone has questions, can they reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know this is something that maybe don't feel comfortable with asking right now, maybe a private phone call or something like that would be different. So, okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Happy Pride Month. Celebrate who you are individually, and cheers to creating a more welcoming space for everybody. So thank you very much for joining us. I look
Thank
forward.
you, Alina. Thank you, Robin and
Thank you
Angie.
for organizing
you.
this. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope to see you
Bye-bye,
again
everyone. Happy
in real
Pride.
time.
Yes,
Okay.
for sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.